didn't have a plan. I wanted to get away. I thought, I want to be a scientist. I want to get a PhD. I can't do it here. I'll give the other place a try. And I remember a particular quote from someone who said, poverty will drive you back.
You've got one suitcase, 3 daughters, very little money, your entire life savings, but it wasn't going to go far.
I'm at the airport. Not only do we not have a plan, we don't have a coat. It's the 4th of December.
So it's freezing.
The children have one light sweater each. So we're actually huddled. Quite quickly, we were in a homeless person's unit.
Hello and welcome to Lives Less Ordinary on the BBC World Service YouTube channel. I'm Jo Fidgen. Let me take you to a defining moment in the extraordinary life of Professor Dame Ijeoma Uchebu. It's 1990. She's a single mum and she's just arrived back in London, where she was born, from Nigeria. She's got 3 young daughters with her. She has one suitcase for all of them and very little cash to start a new life. Within weeks, they'd be in a homeless shelter and Ijeoma would be battling to keep her family fed and keep them safe. So how do you go from there to being a leading expert in the world of nanoparticles? Well, it's a story of grit and sheer determination and some surprises along the way. Ijeoma, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jo, for having me.
Well, let's start with your name, Ijeoma. Your parents came to the UK from Nigeria in 1960. Your mum was pregnant with you, and they chose this name with some significance.
They did. I mean, they had liquidated all their assets and decided to come to the UK in order to get further education. So a lot was riding on this trip because they had sacrificed so much. And then when I popped out, they named me Ijeoma, which means have a safe trip.
Right.
They were hoping they were going to have a good time in the UK.
You were fostered as a baby.
I was. So as soon as they came, so that they could both go to university, my mum went to LSE, my dad started a course in electrical engineering. They then put me up for foster care, temporary foster care, with a family living in Kent. And so as a baby, I was immediately sort of shipped out.
Which wasn't uncommon, I think, for Nigeria.
That was fairly normal for West African students who had families. They would actually send their children to be looked after by someone else because they came from a tradition of an extended family where everybody looks after everybody else's children. So for them, this was fairly normal. And they were very trusting.
When your dad comes to take you home, when you're 4 years old, he's already split up with your mum by this time.
Exactly.
And you've got a stepmum, but you don't know she's your stepmum. You think she's your biological mum.
Absolutely. I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I sort of followed my dad out of the door. I don't actually remember following him out of the door. I just remember that my Auntie Pat, that was my foster mother's name that I called her, disappeared. And then suddenly there was my dad.
So how did you find out then that your stepmum was not your actual mum?
So I was quite a challenging child. I didn't actually always follow the rules. And one day my dad said to me, you know, there seems to be quite a lot of friction here. Do you sometimes believe that your mum is not your mum? And I thought, you know what, I'll just launch a little bullet there and say, yes, I do believe she's not my mum, thinking that would be really nice and hurtful. And he said, well, you're absolutely right. I was shocked. I collapsed into a heap of tears because that wasn't what I was expecting. I thought he would say, no, you're absolutely wrong. She is your mum. So that was the first time I realised that there was another mum out there. I was about 10 years old.
10 years old.
10 years old, yeah.
And your other mum out there, you did get to meet, but only once when you were 13.
I did. So one day my dad said, you know, we're going to meet someone really special and I want you to dress up. I want you to wear your best clothes. So I put them all on. I'm looking forward to this special meeting. And he said to me when we were in the car, actually, we're going to meet your biological mum, your real mum. And I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. I met my mum. She was very, very happy to meet me. She was really quite nervous. She was trembling when we hugged. You know, I tried to put on a brave face because to me at that point she was technically a stranger. But we had the most adorable time. I spent the weekend with her and it was just brilliant.
What did you do?
We went shopping, Joe. We went shopping like it was going out of style.
Do you know why she hadn't been more in your life?
Not really. We never really discussed it at all. I think there was a part of me that didn't want to hurt by asking that question. I kind of felt that if I asked the question, the response would be a difficult response for her and maybe a difficult response for me. So I never really asked. I just enjoyed the moment. I'm 13 years old. I've got all this new stuff. I've got this person that's very attentive, asking me, what would you like to eat? I just focused on that.
But you don't see her again.
I never saw her again because the next time we've now moved countries back to Nigeria, and I'm 14 years old now. And my dad said to me, I'd like to talk to you. So I go into our living room. My dad is sitting there. He says, come and sit close to me. And I'm thinking, okay, I must have done something wrong. I don't know what it is, but I should be prepared. So I sat next to him. And then he said, your mum went to America, because my mum actually did leave the UK and go to the US. And I said, yes. And I thought, oh, she must be coming back. That was my first thought. And he said, well, yes, she went to America and she died in America. And yeah, Joe, I couldn't believe it, actually. It was quite a shock, actually.
Because she would have been very, very young, early 30s.
She was 33. And by now I'm howling. And yeah, it was a big shock, because then I realised I'll never see her again. And I'd never contemplated never seeing her again, actually.
You're so young at that point, and to think that you'd had Auntie Pat, who you thought was your mum, and then you had your stepmum you thought was your mum, then you'd met your biological mum, and I mean, really the one constant figure is your
dad. Yeah.
What was he like?
My dad was really an amazing person. He was something else. My dad had many children. He actually married again, so all in all, 11 children. Right. But my dad was so attentive to me. Every single birthday, till I was in my 20s, because I went to university at 16, he would send me a telegram. Happy birthday. Every single birthday.
But he kept your home life Nigerian.
It was very much so. We ate Nigerian food. He always had his friends round, but it was a very Nigerian household. But we did speak English. We didn't speak Igbo. My father and mother would speak Igbo together, but we would all be speaking in English. So we understood Igbo, but we wouldn't converse with my dad in Igbo. But yeah, it was very nice, because my dad thought it was a temporary stay. Mm. He was always thinking, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back next year. No, I'm going to go back next year. This was a refrain always. We're going to go back. We're going to go back. Mm.
So what was it like for you then growing up in the UK in the 60s and the 70s, which was a pretty racist time in the UK, and there weren't really many Black British role models? So who were you looking to? What was your plan? Who were you going to be?
Well, I really wanted to go and work in a shop. I must admit. I went to grammar school, so I passed the 11 plus, went to grammar school, and in grammar school, I think I met one of my old classmates recently, and she said there were 5 of us, Black children, in a set of 90, so very, very small number, and in those days, I don't know if you know it, but a lot of Black children were considered to have educational needs and put in some special education. This was going on at the time in 50s, 60s, and probably a bit into the 70s. So you had, against that backdrop, we went to school. But in my primary school, I had a very good primary school teacher who really believed in me. I mean, to be honest, I was annoying. I was teacher's pet. And she really used to say, you can do whatever you want. And I put my passing the 11 plus down to her. Really believing, really pushing.
So if she said to you, you can be whatever you want, why did you want to work in a shop? What was the appeal?
Nevertheless, I wanted to sort of be able to buy my own clothes and go dancing. Despite that, I couldn't see myself as a professional person at all, because I didn't sort of look around and see anyone that was like me in those professions at all. So despite not having an experience of being considered educationally underachieving or anything like that, but actually being considered to be someone who was achieving quite a bit, I still couldn't picture myself in those roles.
So when your father got his wish and there was an opportunity to return to Nigeria and you were 13,
Yeah.
did it feel to you from the upbringing you'd had like you were going home or like you were going to a foreign country?
100% going to a foreign country. I felt as if I was leaving all my friends and going to this place I did not know. And it wasn't something I was looking forward to. I put on a really brave face at secondary school that I'm going to this faraway place. But I remember when I went into the head teacher's office and I went to tell her that I was now leaving. And the moment I told her, well, I'm leaving next week or whatever it was, I just burst into tears, floods of tears. I was inconsolable. And I remember her saying, because it was December, well, you'll have Christmas in the sun. And I cried even more. That was the first time I'd let myself feel how I really felt.
And in fact, the sun was not your friend.
At all. So we get to Nigeria and we flew, whereas my dad, he sailed on a boat. So we got there and we're staying with a relative. And within about 4 days, I'd taken to my bed. My skin was all burnt. I looked like a burns victim. It was weeping and nobody knew what was going on. So it was absolutely horrible. And I literally stayed in my bed for about 4 months while doctors tried to figure out exactly what was going on.
It turned out to be some kind of allergy.
It was an allergy to strong sunlight, an allergy I still have, these days. I went for a walk the other day in the south of France. It was a hot day. I burnt all my arm as well. So,
So there you are, you're 13, you're going to a place that is entirely unfamiliar and you're in bed for 4 months. I mean, this is going to make it very hard to make friends, to fit in.
So I go to school eventually, went to school, and I think my classmates were horrified. They'd never seen anything quite like me, looking like a burns victim, speaking strangely. And I didn't have wartime experience as well, which was considered a negative. You've only come back when things are good. It was pretty horrendous, actually, pretty horrendous. Very difficult to make friends, very difficult to get accepted. I was one of the youngest in the class, so a lot of them had missed a few years due to the war. So I go in and they're a bit older. And so you can imagine yourself going into a classroom where the majority of people are 2 years older than you. This is quite a challenging situation because in Nigeria, the hierarchies are strictly enforced. If you're 1 year older, you should respect your elders.
How was your education different?
So when I was in the UK, I found education very easy, really, really, really easy. I was always, I wouldn't say always top of the class, but always close to top. And I was very popular. I had a good group of friends. And you get there and I realised that certain areas of the curriculum were missing, were no longer there. So nothing to do with European history, European geography. We're now studying the curriculum that's relevant to the area. But the one thing that's the same is science. And so I literally took refuge in science and maths because I could understand that. I didn't need to bone up on it. I remember there were some exams I actually didn't study for. Yes, like religious education. I never opened those books once.
So was that the point then when you thought science is for me?
Science is for me. That's exactly what I thought, yeah. Because that's what I could understand. That was what was familiar.
It crosses those cultures.
It's a universal language. I didn't have to learn the language. I didn't have to learn the concepts again. And in fact, they were slightly ahead in Nigeria when it comes to trying to understand concepts. So I had to catch up.
So when did you give up your ambition to work in a shop?
I gave up my ambition to work in a shop almost within 2 days of landing in Nigeria. I stayed with a relative, and that's my uncle, and he was like, what is this nonsense that you're not going to go to university? So, yeah, really quickly.
That's really fascinating. So that's where you get your drive and your ambitions. And I suppose all the role models have changed. You said there really weren't any Black British role models, and now all your teachers are Black. The people with power and influence are Black.
It is a completely different set of circumstances. I felt I could be them, whereas before I dared hope I might be them. And that hope didn't really get me very far, so I decided I couldn't be them.
Could you really feel yourself changing?
With hindsight, because also I was very, very sort of occupied with the deprivation aspect of it, the fact that life was a bit harder and things like that. But with hindsight, I can say that going to Nigeria was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing, because it completely reset my ambition and my aspiration.
So, I mean, your education continues apace. You go to university really early, at age 16. Then you go and get a master's. You get married. I mean, it's all happening very fast. You have three daughters, and then your marriage breaks down, and you decide that you are going to go it alone in the UK with your girls.
Exactly.
It's a big decision. How did it go down with everyone in Nigeria?
I remember saying that I was going to leave, and because really my marriage was not working out at all. I thought I have to leave, and also I wanted to be a scientist, and it was difficult with the infrastructure in Nigeria. But I remember sort of telling people, and they laughed in my face. You're going there with 3 children, and you want to be a scientist. People actually laughed in my face. This will never work. You'll come back because you won't be able to make it, and you won't have enough money. And I remember a particular quote from someone who said, "Poverty will drive you back." So it didn't go down well at all. Lots of people saying this was a very bad idea.
But you just decided you were going to do it. Is that how you made your decisions?
I sort of didn't have a plan. I wanted to get away. I thought, I want to be a scientist. I want to get a PhD. I can't do it here. I'll give the other place a try.
Right. Okay. So there you are. So we're back to where we started. You're arriving in England. You've got 1 suitcase, 3 daughters, very little money, your entire life savings, but it wasn't going to go far.
Not at all. It was unbelievable. So quite quickly, we were in a homeless person's unit.
And I do want to talk to you in some detail about that, but tell me before we get to that, you're at the airport. You said you haven't got a plan. How are you feeling?
I'm at the airport. Not only do we not have a plan, we don't have a coat. It's the 4th of December.
So it's freezing.
The children have 1 light sweater each. So we're actually huddled. We then go to my sister's place in a taxi, which was very expensive, starts eating into our savings. And I'm with my sister for a few days, and she very kindly put us up. 4 people just land there. And then I go to Tower Hamlets and sort of say, well, I haven't got anywhere to live.
This is in East London.
In East London. Could you please help me?
It's interesting to think that in a way your journey has mirrored your parents' journey. They came to the UK to further their studies. They had a young family, but they fostered you. You wanted to keep your girls with you no matter the challenges.
Exactly.
What were you thinking?
So when my dad came, he bought a house with cash. He sold his house in Aba in Nigeria and bought a new house. I came, I couldn't even afford a week's rent. So that's the difference. But what I was thinking is, I mean, the thought of giving my children up for fostering never occurred to me. It wouldn't have happened ever. So all I was thinking is that we're all in this together. We have to make it work together somehow. But I had no plan.
So, Ijoma, you were a single mum. You've got 3 young daughters, almost no money. You don't mind a challenge, do you?
Needs must, Jo.
So you mentioned that very quickly you're moved into a shelter for the homeless
correct.
London. This is not fantastic
No, it's
accommodation.
horrible accommodation. So it's a bed and breakfast for the homeless. At one point, we have 11 families sharing a bathroom.
1 bathroom.
1 bathroom and 1 toilet. And, the kids are young. They're constantly wanting to go. And I have to escort each one of them. So we're constantly out of our room into the shared loo, queuing sometimes if someone's in there. It was awful. And then the people that ran the hotel, because we were homeless, they treated us like homeless people with complete contempt, absolute contempt. And, the kitchen would be closed and you couldn't cook your food. It was not pleasant. When I left there, it was like leaving jail. I was there for 7 months. When the kids and I got into a minivan to go now to our second set of temporary accommodation, sort of a second temporary accommodation, it was like leaving prison.
Right.
That's how I felt.
Right. So in that time, you were looking for research positions to do your
Precisely.
PhD.
Yeah,
And you had a couple of choices.
I did.
One paid quite a lot better than the other one.
Yes, that's true.
So why didn't you take that one?
Well, so I had two choices. One of them was to look at plants and to look at molecules that came out of plants that could be drugs. And the other one was to look at this other thing I'd never heard of, tiny, tiny particles. It wasn't called nanotechnology at the time, but I'd never heard of it. And so I thought, well, this sounds a bit more interesting than fishing molecules out of plants. That has been done for thousands of years. What new things would I find? Whereas this other stuff was brand new. So the other sort of studentship paid less than half of the one I didn't choose. So I chose that one because I thought, I've made this journey, I've sacrificed a lot, has to be worth my while. At least I will learn something new. So my curiosity took me there.
But how do you make ends meet on a tiny amount of money?
It was not easy. At one point, so we eventually moved. We moved a few times, and at one point I just couldn't pay my rent and I needed housing benefit. I went to Camden Council for it and they said no. So what I did is I went to the law library to find out why I wasn't eligible for housing benefit, which is an extra bit of money they can give you for your rent. Found out they'd made a mistake, went back and got my housing benefit.
Wow.
So I had, and they were like, okay, because I went to the law library to read the statutes to understand it.
Well, that says a lot about you that you did that, but not only that you don't take no for an answer, you go and check what the law actually says, but also that you had the time to do this. I mean, really quite extraordinary. But for you, it's a case of do what makes you happy or what fulfills you.
Well, at the time when I chose the PhD I chose, it was following my curiosity. When it came to making sure that we could live somewhere and pay our rent, we didn't have much choice. It had to work or we'd be homeless again.
So it's a sort of survival issue.
Yes, and being homeless twice in the UK is unforgivable.
Let's scoot forward. I think it's 3 years.
Yeah.
And you go to a conference,
That's right.
which lasts 4 days and changes your life, I think it's fair to say.
Changes my life in unimaginable ways, because that's when I met Andreas.
This is Andreas Schatzelein. He's a German scientist.
That's correct.
Will you tell us about the 4th day of that conference when he's driving you to the railway station?
So he's driving. He's actually a passenger. Someone else is driving, and we're sort of driving through the Alps. Everything is covered in snow, and I suddenly realise I'll never see this man again. We've had about a couple of long conversations. That's all, and I start to weep. And he looks at me and says, "I'm weeping inside." And I think to myself, this is a very cheesy line, but I know how you feel. We get to the train station. I'm getting on the train. I give him a little kiss, just a chaste kiss on the cheek. Bye. I've given him my address. Too shy to give him my phone number. And then he says, "I love you." And I start to not weep now, bawl loudly on the train for the 4-hour journey. Because I think to myself, what am I going to do with this? We're at over 1,000 miles apart, but I feel the same.
This is after 4 days.
4 days.
I mean, forgive me, but I've got this image. You're a scientist. I think of you as the ultimate rational person. And after 4 days,
after 4 days,
crying your eyes out for 4 hours on a train over
I'm
somewhere.
hopelessly in love. I go home and, Joe, I stop eating.
Oh.
I'm only cooking for my children, but I'm not eating because I'm thinking about what he said next. And then he said this after that. So, yeah.
And you're waiting to see if he's actually going to write you a letter.
I'm hoping. And when the letter eventually arrives, I go mad. Absolutely mad.
And the letter says everything you want it to say.
It says we need to meet again. And I'm so happy.
Yeah, meet again, except that he's in a different country. He's got his own career.
He's got his own life. But we do meet again, which is nice. And eventually he does come to the UK and give up everything to be with me, a woman with 3 children.
It took you a while to persuade him to marry you.
Oh, that was a chore. He arrived, and I think within a year I sort of asked him the first time, and he was like, "Well, not sure." And this went on. And then I asked him a second time. And the third time I said, I'm not going to ask you again. We either do it or we don't. And he sort of again said, well, I'm not sure. So I thought, okay, we'll just live together and have a happy life. You don't have to be married. And then one day he said, well, we're going to Las Vegas for a conference. I think we should get married while we're out there. And I thought, oh my goodness, I should have just been patient.
So did you dress up as Elvis?
Not at all. I was a little bit pregnant for our last daughter. So, of course, that dictated what I could wear. But we had a lovely ceremony in a little wedding chapel with someone who didn't pronounce my name very well. The children were guests and a couple of other friends of mine. And it was a lovely ceremony, but I cried throughout. I didn't stop from walking up the aisle to the end of the ceremony. I was weeping.
So your now husband is also your business partner.
That's correct.
And you set up a company that develops medicines, a pretty innovative form of medicine, actually. What are you most excited about that you're working on?
So at the moment we're working on, so we've got a couple of things. First of all, we're working on a pain therapeutic, but that's been worked on by another company. We've out-licensed that. But what we are really excited about is our eye drops. These eye drops, we've now tested them in the clinic. We've tested them in humans. And what they do is that they give a lot of drug to the eye where we want it to go, and they don't put drug elsewhere. So they really target the drug to where it should go. And they do that because we wrap them in tiny, tiny particles, which are, about 1,000th of the width of a human hair. That works brilliantly.
How does that help?
Because if you don't have drug elsewhere, you're unlikely to get side effects. Side effects come when drug goes to areas of the body where it shouldn't go.
Okay.
So we've been able to target it to areas of the body where it should go.
And there's some hope as well that you may be able to help with the opioid addiction crisis.
That's correct.
In the United States in particular, but not exclusively.
Yes, that's correct. We've also taken a compound which is in everybody's brain and we've made that into a pain therapeutic. And that's being developed by another company because the opioid crisis in the US kills 80,000 people a year. In the UK, 40 people die every week from opioid poisoning. So if you can get rid of the addiction, and we're hoping with the compound in everybody's brain, we can get rid of the addiction. You'd have pain relief without the addiction.
I mean, extremely serious and important work. I am intrigued that as part of the other side of your life, as an academic, you're a professor at University College London, among other things, that you decided that maybe comedy was the way to communicate with your students. So you took a stand-up comedy course.
That's correct. I did. I took a stand-up comedy course, went there I think it was about 10 weeks. I loved it because it really does help my communication. And when I'm talking to large groups, now I'm president of Wolfson College, Cambridge, I have to do a lot of speeches. It really does help. And I did some Edinburgh Fringe bits as well, which is lovely.
So which is scarier, do you think, working with sort of life-changing medicines where you've got, people's future hopes in your hands, or doing a stand-up comedy routine in front of a live audience?
When I had to do it in Leicester Square, about 150 people, I've spoken at conferences to over 1,000 people, and doing comedy in front of 150 people was more scary.
And more fun?
It was definitely fun once I started.
And once you finished.
But it was absolutely frightening when I was waiting to go on.
Yeah, oh, that's excellent. A few years ago, this is with University College London, you were asked to get involved in race equality issues, which I understand you really didn't want to do. Why
Not at all. I got this email saying, come and get involved in these race equality things that we're trying to do. And I was actually annoyed. I'm far too busy. I said to myself, I'm a scientist. I'm not a social scientist. I don't really understand these things. A real situation of false consciousness and denial. But I did go to the meeting. And once I went to the meeting and I saw the data, I became evangelical. That's the only way to describe it. The data showed that if you're an ethnic minority student, you were less likely to get a second-class upper or a first-class degree. If you're an ethnic minority member of staff, you were less likely to get promoted. And that's the data, and that's awful in itself. But also we had buildings and rooms in our estate named after prominent eugenicists. And eugenics is a pseudoscience, fully pseudoscience, where they were trying to match people's race and the way people look to their cognitive ability, which of course those of us that work in this area, that work in genetics, know that this is nonsense. Anyway, this pseudoscience that these people sort of promoted was something then that they ended up having their names on buildings. This made no sense to me.
Because some of them are taught at the college.
Taught at the university, they apparently they had their names on buildings for other discoveries, but they were well known for their eugenics. So I decided that this couldn't stand as it was, and in the end, we got their names removed.
What difference do you think that has made to students there?
Huge. So if I go in to sit my exams, first of all, I don't know about you, Joe, but I'm always petrified if I have to do an exam. If I had to do an exam today, I'd be petrified. So I go in there, I'm in a state of high anxiety. I have to put my best foot forward. I leave the exam room and I look at the name on the building and I think, oh, let me see what this person's ever done. Then I go and read that actually this person felt that if you were of African descent, you were less than. So I'm going for my second exam now. I don't feel good about going into that room. That's for sure. That will never happen to anyone ever again. And that's what removing the names of eugenicists does. It actually allows people to have a sense of belonging around that environment and they can put their best foot forward.
Have you had feedback from students?
Feedback that you could never believe. I've had feedback from disabled staff saying to me in tears, "Thank you so much." And they start to cry. There was a woman came up to me. She said, "I've got a disability. I just want to thank you for making sure that those names were removed." A white lady. Thank you. So, I mean, I could tell you about a lot of others, but I'm so proud of that, Joe, really.
I know you've done some other work at the university as well. You said, for example, when you got married that your name was mispronounced.
That's correct.
And you think that actually getting to grips with people's names is really important for performance?
It's very important. And students told us this. Students said, well, if you want us to perform best, instead of ignoring us because you cannot say Ijeoma Uchebu and you're worried that you'll get it wrong, just ask Ijeoma Uchebu, how do you say your name again? How do you say your name again? How do you say your name again? So that you include that person in the discussion, in the small group teaching.
You'll ask them a question because you're not afraid of getting it wrong.
Exactly.
No. Yeah.
Students have said that means a lot to them.
Yeah. You're a grandmother now, I think. Yeah.
And my granddaughter never needs to sit her exam in a room named after a eugenicist.
As a grandmother and having, lived the life you live, what is the one piece of advice that you would pass on?
If someone had to give me advice, this is the advice I'd like them to have given me. If you follow your passion and do what really interests you, you'll be okay. So always, if you're choosing a profession, don't choose a profession because you think you're going to earn a lot of money. Choose the profession that you think is very interesting for you.
Do you have any regrets?
If I had to squeeze a regret out of my past, I should have ended my first marriage sooner.
Come to the UK sooner, or?
I shouldn't have stayed for 3 long years in that situation. But yeah, I really don't have any regrets, to be honest.
I don't know what happened with your father, but I'm guessing he was very, very proud.
Yes, my father died 3 years ago, but he was proud of me, that's for sure. But remember, he's got a lot of other children and he's proud of them too. So I never sort of sat him down and said, "Are you really proud of me?" I just have to assume he was.
Right. But are any of them a professor or a dame?
Oh, you're going to get me into trouble now. Pass.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Which of those titles means most to you, professor or dame?
When I got my professorship, I burst into tears because when I came in 1990, I just wanted to get on. I never thought I'd become a professor in the UK. So I burst into tears. When I got the note about the damehood, I went completely crazy. Absolutely crazy. I was screaming all over the house for a full 5 minutes. My husband had to calm me down. I think both of them is quite important, but definitely the professorship came first. So, yeah.
We started by talking about your name, Ijeoma, meaning have a safe trip.
I think I have.
Do you think so? Because I think you have not taken the safe options.
I haven't taken the safe option, but it's as well as safe as it's have a safe trip and have a good trip.
Right.
So I think I've had a good trip.
Excellent. Oh, it's been lovely talking to you. Professor Dame Ijeoma Uchebu, thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed for watching Lives Less Ordinary. Please do like and subscribe to the BBC World Service YouTube channel. See you next time.